thank you guys so much for joining us for another episode of Where Nerds Play. I am your co-host, Pastor.
And I'm the other co-host, CJ.
And we're basically going to talk about some nerd stuff. There is an insect on the ceiling. Anyway, moving on. We're going to talk about a very, very, very important subject to both of us. As you can tell by the props that we have in the front, we are enormous Star Wars nerds and fanatics. We dress up for the 501st. We're members of the 501st. I know I've been into Star Wars since before I can write my name correctly. Yeah, so Star Wars is a big, big part of our life. So we wanted to definitely do an episode about what the franchise means to us and some of the things that we like, some of the things that we dislike, and some of the things that, you know, surprised us, I guess. I know I have a couple that surprised me as being positives. So we have a couple bullet points here. We're going to go through them sequentially somewhat to get everything knocked out and not leave anything out. Is there anything you want to say before we start?
Oh no, dude, let's dive right in.
All right. So the first thing I have written down is, what is the best trilogy of the three? Now, that was obviously going to be one of the questions. That's pretty much what anybody would ask if you ask them about Star Wars. They're going to sit there and be like, well, which one's your favorite? So for me,
I'm talking about favorites. We're talking about the objectively best one.
Yeah, like for me, growing up, I grew up watching the originals. My uncle, who's passed on now, got me into Star Wars, got me into like medieval movies like, Excalibur and First Knight and anything with swords and sword play. So when Star Wars came out, naturally, he was a big fan. He read all the Legends books and he knew a little bit more about Star Wars than what we had at the time, which was only the original trilogy. So for me, that's how I got introduced to the franchise. What about you?
Oh, well, I mean, I grew up watching the movies. So the prequels came out shortly after I was born, like the first one. And I was growing up with my dad, especially watching the prequels and the original trilogy. I remember the third one coming out in theaters, but I don't remember like when the second one came out. What year was it? Like 2003?
The second one I think was, like 2003, 2004, I think, because I was still in high school.
Yeah, so I was real little, so I didn't really get that. I guess I didn't like see that one in theaters or really remember when it came out, but I remember 3 coming out in theaters and going to see it.
Actually, now that I think about it, I think it's like 2001 because I think I was an 8th grader, to be honest, because it was a school trip when the movie came out, and I remember because that's the only Star Wars movie besides the original trilogy, because I wasn't alive yet, that I didn't see in theaters. And it was because I was in school and it was for a school field trip, and I just never had the opportunity to go to the theater to see it because I guess I didn't have an aunt or an uncle or somebody that was available to take me.
Word. Well, yeah, I mean, my dad had them all on VHS for the longest time.
Oh, yeah, dude. VHS. Those of you out there that don't know what VHS is, Video Home System, I think is what it stands for. And
no idea.
Yeah. Basically, it's what old people from the 80s had. And even though, CJ, I don't think you were born in the 80s, but you still got to benefit from VHS.
I still had a VCR at my house until I was like 14.
Heck yeah.
We were poor.
We were poor growing up. But yeah. So anyway, we're going to talk about what the best of the trilogies are. I think for me, I would probably have to say, even though they're somewhat dated, for me, I would say have to give the rights to or the pick to the original for a couple reasons. Are they the best shot? Are they the best like edited? Is the storytelling the best? No, but they went out on such a limb to make these movies. I mean, George Lucas himself had no faith in them whatsoever. He thought they were going to flop, and I think it shows because it kind of just started in the middle. It didn't have a structure. It didn't have any kind of plan going into it, and it was basically his take on what was that movie? Hidden Fortress, I think. It was basically Hidden Fortress with lasers, and that was basically his process on it. So it didn't go in with any expectations. So basically it was like, you don't set your bar so high. But yeah, so the original trilogy pretty much had no like expectations for the most part. People just kind of got what they got, and the fandom was created. So I have to kind of give it, I know it's like grandfathering it in or whatever, but to me, that's a very important part of why it's the best. And because all these trilogies are great for their own reasons. So for me, that's what tipped the scale. What about you?
Well, I definitely think that every trilogy has some merit and it has a case for the best trilogy. It really depends on what aspects you're looking at. I'm not going to talk about my favorite yet because that's towards the end of the show, but I think that cinematically, the visualization of it, the sequel trilogy looks the best, and that goes without saying. It's lacking in some areas, character development isn't the greatest. The storytelling is kind of interesting. It's just there's definitely flaws and holes in it. So I think that in some cases you could definitely look at that one. The original trilogy obviously is super creative. It was the original, like that's where everything really flourished, and it had more interesting character development. I think for Luke, we got the podcast camera going on all helmets. I think it's funny. You had the best character development for, like I said, Luke. Leia was really interesting. Han was cool as well, until you got up to like Return of the Jedi area. And then when you go back to the prequels, I think had the best story, probably not the best acting. The character development was kind of unclear. It's now picking up on my hand. This is all over the place, man. And it's throwing me off.
I think it's because we have all the helmets and all the faces, so you guys get to see close-ups of all the helmets.
Oh, yeah. So I think that there's merit for all three. I think if you had to take everything into account, it would either be the prequels or the original trilogy. I'd probably go with the original trilogy as the objectively best one.
Now, again, there's definitely, it's up for debate. I know a lot of people have their reasoning for, I've actually even heard people say, oh, the originals are kind of bad. Even if, you take the dated aspect out of it and all that, they're just objectively bad. I don't agree with that. And I think the most of the majority of the fans or even people that know about Star Wars are like, yeah, they were pretty cool movies, whatever. But to say it's actively bad, I think, like I said, back in the 70s, there wasn't this like stickler like list of like continuity. And we get continuity errors still today, all that kind of stuff that, you just take it with the territory. And I think that some of the most innovative filmmaking was in the original trilogy. And I know that scene where there's like a faraway shot of Luke and Ben and the droids on the land speeder. And back then they had no real CGI to make it look like, it was actually hovering and flying and stuff. They used like models for the spaceships and stuff like that. And what Lucas, I don't know if you know this, CJ, but what Lucas did to make it look like the land speeder had no wheels was he put Vaseline on the camera lens. He actually rubbed Vaseline on the camera lens on the bottom so that when he hit record, the lens didn't pick up the fact that the land speeder actually had wheels on it. So it looked like it was basically like a reflection. I guess the way it works on a camera back then, it looked like a reflective source or something like that. And it was basically just reflecting on the sand and stuff around it. Or I think it masked because it was the same color of the sand. I can't remember how it was, but I read that somewhere and I thought that was incredible because nowadays everything is CG. Everything's pretty much done on a computer. And back then they didn't have that luxury. So
yeah, that's interesting. I actually didn't know about that. I think one of my favorite shots though from the original trilogy has to be they were in Hoth, and there's a shot. It's supposed to be like from the pilot's canopy, basically, when in the snow speeder as it's coming down and kind of between the legs of the AT-AT. And the way they shot that was literally they had the camera on a cable and let it fall between the legs.
Oh, basically like a zip line.
Yeah, essentially that's literally how they shot the thing. And all they did to change it from that was they added explosion and then cut the camera or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, little things like that. I know that there are negatives. Like, obviously, there's a scene where when the AT-AT tips over from that same sequence, and you actually see
Stop
that
motion.
Well, yeah, and they actually have like a bar or something that kind of like raises up to physically tip it over because
really?
Yeah, and it shows in the movie just like Gladiator has the AC the CO2 or whatever kind of tanks that they have on the back of the chariot, and when it flips over, you see it, and that thing kind of takes you out of the movie. But I mean, sometimes they make for really good stories, and I bet you didn't catch it the first time kind of deal. But I mean, that's for another video.
In The Mandalorian, they literally had a dude in like a t-shirt and jeans, and you could see one of his legs in the side of his shirt. Like you could see like half his body, just not his head.
Yeah, I think that was the episode that Carl Weathers directed, and everybody was like giving him crap for it, and then they ended up fixing it. But yeah, I mean, movies are movies, and I get it. If it's entertaining and you had a good time, in my opinion, it's a good movie. Whether it's a great movie, that's something different. But I'm glad that we agree to some. We agree on Star Wars stuff for the most part. But I'm glad that the overall consensus is that the originals still hold up, and I think just like you do, that they're the best ones. So
I think that there's a solid contention between the prequels and the original trilogy, though.
Oh, definitely.
I think they're awfully close.
Yeah, for real. And we're gonna probably get more into that because I think there's a reason that everyone's accepting the fact that is a fact at this point, and I think we'll touch on that later. But we're gonna move on to the worst trilogy of the three.
I mean, like I just said, I think that there's a solid case for all three of them. They all have definite positives, and they all have clear flaws. But like I just said, the prequels and the original trilogies, I think, are awfully close. So it means you kind of have to put the sequels at the bottom there. I don't think that there is a bad Star Wars trilogy. I don't think that there is a bad Star Wars movie. That being said, I think the one with the most flaws that I care about, at least, have got to be the sequel.
And for me, we agree again, but for me, it was a little different because you would think that with all this time and the fandom and the fact that, you know, there's more and more technology and more money and all that, that they would just knock it out of the park. I mean, I remember seeing, the seventh one, when that was announced, it was like, for me, I felt I felt like the spark ignited again.
Oh yeah.
You know, that trailer was probably the last trailer that I watched that I actually enjoyed, and I actually was like counting down the days and the minutes to watching it when it was like, you know, announced or whatever, and or teased and stuff. And I was like, Christmas is going to be great this year because we're going to get a new Star Wars movie. So, with that being said, I know I mentioned like 10 seconds ago that we were going to talk about why the prequels are so high up now when I remember them being regarded as terrible. There's a very popular YouTube channel called Red Letter Media, sorry, and I believe the main person on that YouTube channel kind of like started. He went viral, if you will, with a video basically just tearing apart the prequel trilogy and why they're terrible. He made pretty valid points. I mean, they're, you know, from like a storytelling and from plot holes and stuff like that. I know that one of my favorite ones he says is, how can this be a Star Wars movie when it contradicts the originals? And he shows a clip of Ben Kenobi or of Yoda saying, do or do not, there is no try. We've all said that a million times. And then he shows a clip of Ben Kenobi in episode 3 saying, only a Sith deals in absolute. So it's like, you know, and I get it. He was probably joking, but there's some, you know, there's some sense, I guess, in that. And that was it just made for a really entertaining video. Did it make me hate the movies? No. He was talking about the lightsabers being utilized way too much, so that the mystique and the awe of them were just totally erased because they were just every 5 seconds a flurry of lightsaber battles. But growing
that was
up,
the point.
Yeah. And for me growing up, that's what I wanted.
Exactly.
You know? So, but anyway, feel free to check out those videos. I think they're entertaining. And if you can go in there with an open mind, I think you'll have a good time. But,
well, I mean, I remember when I was younger, and I love the prequels. Especially when I was younger, the prequels were by far my favorite. I did not have as much appreciation for the original trilogy, probably because the cinematic part of it wasn't nearly up to par. Because especially for the late 90s, like, the prequels looked solid.
Oh, yeah.
They weren't the best things out there. I mean, Jurassic Park was definitely better looking overall than probably the prequels of Star Wars, but there was a lot more to do in the prequels in Star Wars, right? So it looked amazing. The story was very interesting, especially for me being a kid when the prequels came out. Everybody regards the prequels as really slow moving, but I always like understood what was going on. It was definitely a more adult series. Like, it was, aside from the fact that there's a ton of lightsabers, the storytelling was definitely more adult.
Well, I think the storytelling, like on paper, may have been, but I definitely think it was geared more towards kids, just because it was a newer generation of Star Wars characters, and they pretty much were trying to keep the fire going.
Well, it dealt so much with politics. I think that's what I'm really getting at.
So basically, it's like a Disney Channel original show. Like, you watch it, your kids are allowed to watch it. There's not going to be anything, you know, referencing anything that's not for kids, but the adults are laughing at the innuendos and stuff like that.
That's not even really what I'm getting at. I'm just saying, like, I feel like any person can kind of follow the original trilogy or even the sequels and know what's going on. But I feel like conceptually, and like I said, from a story aspect, that the prequel trilogy definitely had so many more facets to it. And if you're not really following it, it's easy to like miss part of the story and not really know, hey, why are they doing this? And in all honesty, the Clone Wars animated series, I think is pretty needed for the prequels, and it gives a lot more context.
Definitely. We do have a segment about, I wrote down trying to talk about what would be a movie in the trilogy that I thought. I know we talked a little bit off camera saying that you didn't think there was one, but there are movies, I think one in each trilogy, that I deem as unnecessary. And because of the Clone Wars television show, I don't mean to jump the gun here, but obviously episode 2 would be the qualification for that, for the prequel trilogy. But I don't know why the prequel trilogy was hated so much objectively. I know I say that word a lot because I try to put myself in that frame of mind when I'm trying to say, these movies were bad because X, Y, Z. The Last Airbender, terrible movie. Dragon Ball Evolution, terrible movie. I think
Avatar
it was rough. It was rough. But I think that's for another episode as well. I don't know. I feel like all of these bullet points I made, there's arguments on either side. As far as I shouldn't have wrote worst movie, but I did. And or worst trilogy rather.
Yeah, so okay, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's really just the opposite of the coin. And I kind of like how you pointed out the whole prequel trilogy, because I remember like growing up on the internet, I'd just see like how people would badmouth it and talk about how terrible it was, basically up until the sequels came out.
Yeah, like we watched, I don't know, it wasn't you, it was actually me and a friend. We were watching Clerks 2 for the first time. I'm a big Kevin Smith fan, and I promise I'm not getting off key for this for no reason. What's up?
Never seen it.
Never seen it?
No.
Bro, every single episode. I think this is 3 for 3 that we've talked about movies we need to watch for the channel. But
I think we might have talked about Clerks already.
Maybe possible. I reference the Star Wars scene in Clerks 2 a lot because it does exemplify how people felt about the prequel trilogy. I know at one scene the characters like, Anakin Skywalker and Padme and, the crappy acting ruining the saga and stuff like that. So I definitely see the allure or the reasoning or the fandom, so to speak, of people that are just hating the original or the prequels. But definitely, like you said, when episode 8 came out, I was like, okay, now I see it. Although I never really hated the prequels. It wasn't until watching those videos that I was like, wow, there's a lot of problems with these movies, but I didn't see them as a kid because who does,
If you hate majority of the movies, you're just not a Star Wars fan.
I agree with that.
Just stop. You're ruining the fan base you're ruining the movies for everybody. Just quit.
Yeah, I mean,
if you don't like them, stop watching them.
I mean, I'm probably gonna be a little bit more, but which is why we get along so well, because I'm a little bit more reserved and not so blunt. But in a nutshell, I agree. These movies are meant to be entertaining, and if you're gonna spend your whole life just pooping, or for lack of a better phrase, because we're not cursing here, on a franchise that
don't stop me.
you're gonna spend all your energy and stuff just talking down about it, then like, what is that? Like, doesn't make sense.
I think I might have said it on the podcast before, and I'm going to say it again now in case I haven't, and I know I've said this to you. There is no bad Star Wars movie.
Right.
But the fans will constantly, the fans, will constantly crap on a majority of the movies. They used to hate the prequels with a passion. They all hate the sequels with a passion. They hated Solo with a passion. The only pure movies, in my opinion, from what I've seen for people, complaining, are the original trilogy and maybe Rogue One.
Well, that's funny you say that because
Rogue One's my favorite.
Rogue One is really good. And I know you and I agree on that. I mean, I don't have to convince you or you convince me, but there are a lot of people that I know personally in the 501st that hate Rogue One. They cannot stand it.
I don't get that.
I don't get it either. I actually have no bullet point on Rogue One, so I'm just going to insert one here because we're talking about it. Rogue One is probably the ultimate Star Wars movie, in my opinion, for this reason. Hear me out. You got, not like I said, I'm not having to convince you, but don't click off of this podcast yet. I promise I'm probably going to make sense, hopefully. And the reason is it's the only Star Wars movie that you get 3 film genres in the same movie. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
Okay, so obviously starts off as a Star Wars movie because that's what you went to the theater for.
It's not really a genre.
Well, let's see, sci-fi action, unless we'll call it that.
Okay.
And then slowly transitions into a military movie. And, it has very, very iconic cinematography. I remember movies like Saving Private Ryan and even like Wind Talkers and Forrest Gump at one moment in the movie. And then out of nowhere for 20 seconds, it's a horror movie.
I wouldn't really get
when Vader shows up.
I wouldn't.
I mean, in I don't know. We didn't see it unfortunately together, but in the theater. But I don't think we did.
I don't remember.
I don't remember either. But yeah,
honestly, that one sticks out the least as far as my experience watching it the first time.
Well, I loved it because I knew the story. So going into it, like going to see Titanic, you know the ending, you know what's going to happen, but you're still going to see it anyway. And Rogue One told that story that we all knew perfectly. Even at the very end when we knew what was going to happen, realistically, everyone had to die.
Yeah.
We were still like, oh my God, and we were still drawn into it. And it had that same Shakespearean storytelling that the prequels had.
Yeah.
That was very much, love-driven and revenge and
I
betrayal. And
love driven.
well, kind of. If you think of the cause as the original love interest, and then it kind of like turns into this like Jin or so, I can't remember his name for the life of me right now.
Cassian Andor.
Cassian, thank you.
But that wasn't really a love interest. That
No.
was actually one thing that a lot of people praised at it, is at the end they didn't make them, kiss and fall in love. It was just more of like I wouldn't even call it much of a friendship thing, because it was very loose as far as friendship goes. They barely knew each other.
Well, yeah.
It was like we're doing something we believe in. We're working together. We're a team. It was more about a team story. Think like sports,
Yeah, well, like the cause. They were in love with the cause.
Yeah, exactly. So I wouldn't really call it, a love story.
That's fair. I mean, but definitely
Like a ragtag team.
yeah.
Ocean's 11.
Ocean's 11. I could see that.
Never seen it.
It's actually they're actually pretty entertaining. All these movies. I have to literally write these down. But yeah.
But I'm gonna just backtrack just a little bit, because I didn't really finish the point I was getting at. Is people will just crap on all those Star Wars movies. Fans will crap on all those Star Wars movies, and then you turn around and you look at DC, and there are practically zero good DC movies, and that's over exaggerated. There are a few good DC movies, but DC fans will defend the worst DC movies to the end of the earth.
So it's like a cultural thing. It's like like Europe, like European football.
Sure, I guess. I don't know. But Justice League, even the Snyder Cut, was not a good movie. It just was not. It was horrible even. It was maybe, I didn't watch the original. It was maybe better.
Oh, definitely better.
But better does not mean good.
And
by any means.
You said that. I know, unfortunately, only some of you got to see that video because copyright problems I was having during the uploading process of it. I had to put it on for the patrons on a Google Drive link so you guys can get to see us watching it for the first time and all that good stuff. Because it was a 4.5 hour movie. Not sure how else I could have fixed it, but I tried everything to get it to be able to be posted, even if it wasn't monetized. And Warner Brothers was just like, no.
Not having it.
Yeah. So unfortunately, you missed out. Most of you missed out on, a lot of like genuine reactions and stuff to that movie. But yeah, so about the storytelling of that for a second, since we're on the topic, I agree with you. It wasn't a good movie. Oh. It was definitely the ultimate fan service, though. And to me, it was enough to carry it over for me to give it. I think I gave it a really high rating. I think I gave it like a 7 or an 8 or something like that, because I have been a Batman fan forever. And to me, I didn't know if we were going to get the like justice, no pun intended, of the Affleck Batman again after we saw Batman v Superman. And then Suicide Squad came out, and I hated it. And
see, I actually didn't think Suicide Squad was nearly as bad as people made it out to be.
See,
I think it was a better movie than the Justice League.
Well, and that's the thing. I'm guilty of not going in to see this particular group of movies as a film or a movie, because the Nolan universe, for me, spoiled me. So to me, I'm not looking, and not necessarily at another Christian Bale.
That was the like Dark Knight movies, right?
Yeah. Okay. Now, I'm not looking at like, oh, Christian Bale is like the Batman. He's like the Robert Downey Jr. to Batman. It's not because of that, but it's because of the movies, the score, the soundtrack, everything about it, like engrossed me in Batman, and it made me feel like Batman was real. That's why. And I don't think I'm ever going to see that on the big screen again. And if I do, it's always going to live in the shadow, unfortunately, in my mind of that. I mean, I could be wrong. You can blow me away if you're out there and you're aspiring to make a Batman movie. By all means, blow me away. But
I should cast a Batman movie.
Sure.
Willem Dafoe as the Joker.
Oh, that's fair.
That's it.
Cool. So moving on to it, I don't think we officially said it.
Back on topic.
In our opinion on the worst trilogy. But for me, it would probably have to be the sequels.
I definitely said the sequels, yeah.
You did, yeah. And for me, it was the fact that if it wasn't for The Mandalorian, spoiler alert incoming, if you haven't seen The Mandalorian, especially season 2, do not just pause this video, maybe even come back to it, because I'm going to spoil the ending of season 2. So there's your warning. If it wasn't for the ending of The Mandalorian season 2, the Luke Skywalker scene, obviously that's what I'm talking about, I would still be upset at episode 8 of Star Wars, because to me, they didn't do Luke justice. I think we went, 20 years or so or something like that without having Luke Skywalker, everything was, the animated series, and we had the prequels to rewatch and stuff like that. And Luke was just not there. And for those of us who are fans of the Legends books, he is a big, big part of the Jedi Order and everything like that.
But
And
Legends isn't canon. This is a new story.
right. And unfortunately, that's still something that, a lot of us are having a hard time with, because there is a lot of stuff from Legends that I wish was canon. And that's, again, for another episode. I'm actually, happy we're talking about Star Wars, because it's going to lead into a lot of different Star Wars episodes, I think, in the future. But basically, if it wasn't for the ending of Mandalorian, I would have still had a sore taste in my mouth about Luke in episode 8, because it was like they spend the entire episode 7 trying to find him. They finally find him at the end, and then episode 8 begins, and the first thing he does is throw the lightsaber over his shoulder like a senile old man. Now, I get it. To me, it works for Yoda, because Yoda is like ungodly old. But for Luke, it's like, it just seems like a cop-out. I hated it. His whole outlook on the whole thing. I was like, okay, if you're going to have such a strong emotion about something that you gave your life to, at least give us a flashback or show us or something like that. And eventually we did get the whole Ben Solo thing. I'm well aware of that. But I was expecting like Luke, not necessarily Mara Jade or anything like that, even though we're supposed to be getting that allegedly. I wasn't wanting something in specific from Legends, but I wanted the Luke Skywalker that we ended up getting in The Mandalorian. We didn't really get to see anything except for wild hacking, Mark Hamill just flailing his lightsaber on his dad repeatedly, and then all of a sudden the fight was over. So for me, it was like, I guess theoretically, how do you go from such good choreography in the originals to this just, and I know real world has a lot to do with that. I'm not trying to like contradict myself here, but that's why I gave the sequels the worst or the weakest spot, is what I should have said instead of the worst. Because like you said, there's no bad Star Wars movie.
I agree.
So yeah, moving on from that. Now we have, which is our favorite movie from within each trilogy. I'm going to let you start with that one.
Ooh, the prequels. So, I love all of them.
Okay.
I think there's definitely a case for the first one, just because Darth Maul, like that alone. But they didn't really do him justice in that movie. I mean, you kind of see him. He shows off this cool double-bladed lightsaber. There's a cool fight. It was awesome. But you didn't get any of his story. In my opinion, what should have happened was we see what happened to Darth Maul like in the Clone Wars, but in episode 2. And you just have an ongoing rivalry between 2 and 3 between Obi-Wan and Maul. That would have made the prequels probably astronomically better than the original trilogy.
Oh, hands down, especially since Clone Wars. But yeah.
But since you have that in the Clone Wars, if you're including that, then, I would say it is, but that's a lot to include. I wouldn't think that's fair. And then if you're looking at just the movies, Grievous kind of comes out of nowhere and he looks cool, but you have nothing to go off of. Dooku's kind of unnecessary in the prequels. He's more entertaining in the Clone Wars series, but in the movies just kind of means nothing. So in my opinion, what they should have done was have, just Maul all the way through. That being said, again, the first movie, you get your establishment, the pod racing scene's badass. Darth Maul is really cool. You get Qui-Gon Jinn was awesome, but your story, it's almost unrelated to the rest of the films. And then Attack of Clones was interesting. I would love the whole Battle of Geonosis scene, the whole, hey, here's the clones, here's how they come out. Obi-Wan versus Jango. And then you get into the last one and the fall of Anakin. Now, I know when I was younger, I was not a huge fan of Revenge of the Sith.
Really?
Just when I was a kid. Now I have way more appreciation for it. And I would probably put it at the top because it showed so much more complexity. You got the final character switch from Anakin to Vader, and then it really showed that emotion from Obi-Wan and having to deal with that whole situation.
If I may, and if you can tap into that younger version of yourself when you didn't really care for the movie, what would have been your favorite one then, just out of curiosity?
Probably, and this is, I guess, more because there's just a bunch of lightsabers, probably episode 2.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. I remember that Yoda scene, and I remember the DVD actually having, like, back when DVDs were the only thing we had, you can go actually in the menu and start from, like, the chapters. I think Blu-ray still has that, but I remember the DVDs, especially for Harry Potter as well, where you can actually go to to that scene, and the very first part of that chapter is Yoda, hobbling in with his cane, and You know, you're like, oh, here we go. That's perfect. You know, chapter, what is it, 17 or 20 or whatever it is. So
He
yeah,
fights helps with Dooku and stuff.
yeah,
Picks up the pillar. Yeah.
yeah, and the back to the whole Luke thing. If memory serves, and I think it does, but I'm getting older, my memory's fading a little bit. I remember reading one of the Legends books, and it shows that Luke Skywalker was either the inventor or the master who perfected the lightsaber style of having two lightsabers at the same time, one on each hand, and that's the first time we got to see it in the big screen.
Luke?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Correct me if I'm wrong. Those of you out there,
chronologically, it would have been Ahsoka, right? Well, I mean, it would have been before Ahsoka.
well, I mean, like the style of, well, maybe not having two lightsabers, but that when Anakin does that move against Dooku where he spins, but he uses one as like a backswing, and he doesn't. He does like 4 or 5 rotations.
So
yeah. Anakin does it with Dooku, and sorry,
Yeah,
I meant Anakin. Yeah, he goes with Dooku, and that kind of like when I saw that as a kid, I drew no reference to it, but then after I read that as an adult, I was like, well, that's cool that you get to see Anakin do a move that eventually Luke like masters, you know, and I thought that was really cool. But yeah, so for me, my favorite, it's very easy. Unlike you, which I appreciate that because most people I think are gonna fall in the same court as I do, and who wants the same old boring answer? But here it is. Unfortunately, I shouldn't say unfortunately, but I fall under the same category as most of you watching this probably, or any Star Wars fan in general, and that's with the third one. The third one, to me, I saw it in theaters like 5 times. I knew that it was going to be the birth of Vader. I didn't know how they were going to do it. For some reason, again, old memory from my childhood, I remember my uncle reading a book, and I asked him, why does Darth Vader look like that? And he's like, well, he had a horrible accident, and they gave him that suit so he can live. And this was way before the trilogy came out, the prequels, because my uncle unfortunately passed right before Episode 1 came out.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he basically wouldn't have known that. So I think he got it from like a story or a book or something, that apparently in one story, Vader, there's like a theory that he crashes a TIE fighter, and the crash is what causes his accident, and they solved pretty much the same thing that happened.
I think originally in Legends, he was still like completely normal, undamaged when he first turned, and it wasn't until later on that he got a TIE fighter. Sounds about right.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you guys, again, any of you out there who knows more about Legends than I do, definitely let me know in the comments below. And any other questions and concerns, obviously, throughout the podcast, load those comments because I love reading them, and I love, hearing what part of the episode you guys found the most relatable and the most enlightening and all that good stuff. But anyway, moving on. I think we're good with talking about why our favorite from the first trilogy, or the prequel trilogy. I think we can move on to the original.
OG.
So do you want to start?
Sure. I don't think it's A New Hope.
Okay.
I think that one's kind of out of the question. It establishes everything. It's definitely the slowest moving. Han Solo is probably the most interesting character to me.
In A New Hope, or?
In A New Hope.
Okay.
And then it moves on to Empire. It makes Han Solo more interesting. It also makes Luke more interesting. You get, Boba Fett comes out. You have... you see more Vader. You see the whole Lando situation. Empire's really solid, but I think my favorite has got to be Return of the Jedi. The whole Jabba's palace scene.
Oh yeah,
is out of the original trilogy probably my favorite, and then the whole ending sequence with Vader and Luke and Palpatine, I think, is really what made that movie. The Ewoks, I know a lot of people have problems with those. They think they're dumb or whatever. I think they're fine. It wouldn't really make sense for them to beat up a bunch of scouts, but it is what it is. Scout troopers look awesome. They're way cooler than, standard stormtroopers. I always thought the standard stormtroopers look kind of dumb, and that's why I've never gone for that armor for the 501st. I just don't think they look cool at all.
I kind of disagree a little bit, because that's part of the reason why I like being a TIE pilot, is because a lot of it looks like a cooler version of the original TK. But that's awesome that you have a different opinion, because like I said, contrast.
But yeah, I definitely think that the best has got to be Return of the Jedi, like mainly because of the Jabba's palace scene, and then of course the final sequence between Luke and Vader and Palpatine, like you said before, him just wailing on Vader, and then the only really really goofy part about that is Vader literally just picks up Palpatine and drops him over there. That's like
as goofy as it is, it definitely provided to some degree the conclusion of Anakin being the chosen one to bring balance. That was literally what
Well, no,
Qui-Gon prophesized or whatever.
he had already brought balance to the Force way before that.
Really?
Yeah, when all the Jedi were killed, there was 2 Jedi and 2 Sith left. You had Obi-Wan and Yoda versus Palpatine and Anakin. Brought balance. 2 light side, 2 dark side.
Interesting. I didn't know that it was that literal. I thought it was more of like the ending of Palpatine is balance to the Force.
I mean, you could say that, but realistically, the Force was extremely unbalanced
Oh,
during
definitely.
the Clone Wars. It was all light side.
Yeah, I mean,
you can't have light without the dark.
here we are recording an episode, and CJ is literally blowing my mind away with that because I didn't even put 2 and 2 together on that.
That's always how I've read it. I don't know if that is agreed with Lucas or not, but I always read it that way. Is Anakin had already brought balance to the Force. Anakin did. Well, I guess that was early Vader. But more than anything, I guess you would say Palpatine brought balance to the Force technically because he was the mastermind behind it all.
Well, then, not to get off topic, but how would you explain the whole, and again, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen all of Rebels, basically don't listen to this part, fast forward or whatever.
Well, Rebels didn't exist at that point.
Well, I know,
Yeah.
but that, okay, well then I guess that's fair. I guess we don't have to get into that, but I was just going to say the mall scene where he's talking to Ben Kenobi and the very last thing that he asks him
Is
before.
it true he's the chosen one?
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, nobody truly understood what that meant, and even Maul said, "Will he avenge us? Not so much will he bring balance to the Force." And then, if you want to get into, I thought you were getting into the whole, "Hey, Ezra's a Jedi," and "Hey, Kanan's a Jedi," and they survived. Cal Kestis is a Jedi.
Oh, no.
And if you want to get into that, there's more explanation for that. Is you have the Inquisitors. That would be the parallel to that.
Right.
We really don't have an exact number of how many dark side Force users and how many light side Force users exist after Order 66.
But for a brief moment, he did bring balance because there was 2 and 2.
It was even then, no, there's technically some that still survived because Kanan would have been alive, right? Cal would have been alive. But I think it's just because we've expanded on it since then. And my assumption is originally he brought balance being just those 2. Of course, we've been given more since then.
Yeah.
Now we know that Ahsoka survived. Now that we know Kanan survived, we know, like I said, Cal Kestis survived. Eventually, Ezra was shown to be Force sensitive. Maul survived after that point.
Asajj too.
Asajj, I guess. I mean, she could still be alive. We haven't seen her in anything.
Well, she dies in the comics.
Okay, in canon comics or
Yeah.
Legends.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm not aware of that, or when it happens. But as of the end of the Clone Wars, at least she's still alive, I assume.
Yeah, it's a very tragic story. For those of you that don't know, it involves a character that I really didn't think was going to be involved in a story arc like that, but it was Quinlan Vos. It's actually
Quinlan
really
Vos
good.
killed it, really?
No, he didn't, but he was heavily involved in an arc. I won't ruin it for you because I think it's a good read.
Well, just tell me. I don't care.
Well, I don't want to ruin it for them. Moving on.
Spoiler alert. You does.
No, basically, I'm not going to spoil the whole thing, but he and her become a thing, and that's the end of it. Okay, so
all right, cool.
With that being said, about being my favorite,
sequels.
my favorite ones from the original movies, like you said, yours was Return. For me, getting back on track, I think.
Oh, you didn't do yours. My bad.
No, it's good. I think the first ones, the first movie, A New Hope, is definitely really solid. Like you said, it introduced us to what Star Wars was. It kind of started off. It was a really ballsy move to kind of just start in the middle of a story with a dude in a black outfit with a bunch of dudes, in armor, just walking into this tunnel, and you're like, what is going on? And all of a sudden there's a princess and there's like a giant trash can, and you're like, what is happening right now? But I do love that. You don't really look at it like that anymore because of movies like Rogue One and movies like Episode 3 and stuff like that. So. For me, my favorite, I would love to say, again, falling under the popular opinion just because of what the movie meant to me and what it meant to movie making and cinema in general, would probably lean towards Empire because it had the most cinematic, I guess the best cinematic reveal of probably all time, which is the obviously Luke, I am your father scene.
That's not what he says.
You're right.
No, I am your father.
That's right. Thank you. But yeah, so for me, I would probably lean towards that, but my heart, just cannot ignore how impactful and how amazing that Endor scene was with the Jawa or the Ewoks and the Wookiees. You got to see, them set traps and hijack a AT-AT or ATST rather, and the fact that now we know a little piece of trivia that one dude with the perfectly white beard is
Rex.
That's awesome.
About Wookiees.
Yeah, I said, Chewie and yeah, at one point Chewie gets involved. Yeah.
But yeah, you see Rex outside the building right next to Han Solo. He's got the little beard.
Yeah.
That was like a later clarification, I guess. That was never originally supposed to be him, obviously, because it didn't exist conceptually yet. But
it's like a soft retcon, I guess you would say, but it works because it doesn't ruin anything. But yeah, that scene was amazing. I'm currently working on a diorama of the Battle of Endor with the bunker and, you know, the whole 3PO with his hands up, like, you know, I'm gonna give up, you know, and I'm working really hard on that. So I guess I have that fresh in my mind, but I have to move that aside for a moment to remember that Empire was so strong. It had a lot of, you know, the Hoth sequences, the fact that it, you know, for me watching it as a kid, I was genuinely afraid that Luke was going to die. Like, I was like, oh no, you know, Luke is literally, you know, he's stuck in the middle of this blizzard and he has nothing. And then all of a sudden Han, you know, and then of course the Wampa is not even on anyone's radar till it happens. So for me, it was such a good movie because it showed the actual birth of the rebellion as opposed to them being like this, you know, covert group of people that was rebelling against an empire. You actually got to see their base and their structure, and you know, you got to see the snow speeders for the first time, and you know, it was great. The AT-ATs like on that Hoth scene, it was just an incredible movie. So for me, it would probably have to be Empire for more reasons as I'm talking about it, but the Battle of Endor is what kind of makes me undecided. So for now, I would say it's Empire. If I probably watch episode 6 right now, I'd probably say it was that one, but I know for sure it's not episode 4. Sorry if that sounds like a cop-out answer, but that's what I got right now.
All right, cool. Well, let's hop into these sequels.
So for me, the sequels are it's just like the prequels, very easy to pick which is my favorite.
Thanks.
Yeah, for me, it's episode 7. Episode 7 is definitely my favorite because of what it represented. The fact that Star Wars was such an established fandom, and people, human beings, they don't like change. I'm not a psychiatrist, but that's definitely something that gets thrown around a lot, and I tend to agree with it. And the fact that you're not only introducing human characters, but you're going to introduce a droid into a movie that everyone's expecting to see, 3PO and R2-D2, and then all the other droids are kind of just there, you know? And then we get this introduction of BB-8, and it just takes off. Like, instantly loved. I know everyone I went to see it with, everyone was like, "Oh my god!" The only thing I didn't like about it was how he moved. It didn't bother me at all.
It was kind of goofy.
I could see why, because it is kind of impractical. It definitely made for marketing impractical. Like the toys were never really good because the magnets were kind of weak and stuff like that. But it was just super brave. I think J.J. Abrams, he did play it safe because he pretty much did shot for shot episode 4, but it still worked. I think the overall storyline still worked just fine. And for me, it just stood out the most. We got to see the Falcon. We got to see how big the Falcon actually was for the first time. Like for me, it just looked like a normal ship. I didn't realize it had like the bowels of the Falcon. You know, like it had like all this extra room and all this other stuff. It actually felt like a freighter to me. And I'm trying to think of other points that made episode 7. I know Finn, great character.
I hated episode 7.
You did?
Yes.
Really?
Yes, because J.J. Abrams got me so attached to Finn as a character. He was super interesting, and then Disney said, nope, and they threw him down the garbage chute. Finn deserved so much better. They started way up here, and they just did absolutely nothing with him. And that was, in my opinion, the absolute worst thing about the sequels is how underutilized Finn was.
But that's not J.J. Abrams' fault, though.
Kathleen Kennedy, fire her right now. I don't know who made this decision to make Finn not interesting after the first movie, but fire them forever. Put me in charge.
Interesting. All right, so I mean, I can see that because, like I said, Finn was very, very. He was an awesome character, and he was very underutilized. I mean, that iconic scene with Kylo.
It's the first time we're getting attached to a stormtrooper.
Yes.
And he's force sensitive.
Yes.
Which they never did anything with. Excuse me? You could have had 2 Jedi training this whole time. Sure, he may not be as powerful as Rey Palpatine. Not Rey Skywalker. Rey Palpatine. But he could have been his own Jedi. Like, why wouldn't you train the both of them and then have them keep the romantic side out of it, which fortunately they did.
Yeah.
Between the two of them. And just have them as friends and be trained as Jedi and work together. And, you know, he picks up that lightsaber during the first movie. That was the most excited I was watching The Force Awakens. And then again, they threw him in the garbage. He had so much potential.
They threw him in the trash compactor.
The trash compactor, yes.
Yeah. So just touching on that lightsaber scene, you know, holds it like a baseball bat. I was digging it. I don't know why. I just love that high pose he had. The contrast of the fact that it was nighttime. Haven't really seen a nighttime duel. I mean, we've seen duels in the dark, obviously, with episode 6 and episode 2, but we never saw a fight at night in the open. A very, very like samurai, which is basically obviously influenced Star Wars from the start, the Japanese culture and stuff, and World War II and all that good stuff that we all know about. But I loved the fact that they fought in that forest. It was snow everywhere. You know, the contrast of Kylo's saber, even the fact that his saber was super unstable, kind of gave it even more of a contrast. And then, of course, that blue, that like Arctic blue of Anakin's saber, that was amazing. So for me, definitely would be episode 7. Of course, like I said earlier in the video or earlier in the podcast, it was the best trailer. The fact that it, brought back the Han and Chewie scene where he's like, we're home. I think there wasn't a single person in the theater when they saw that trailer that they weren't like, I am so ready for December, whatever it was.
I kind of wish they kept that kind of stuff out of the trailer because it would have made that scene so much more impactful.
I think so. But at the same time, I think it was brilliant because the generation that grew up with the original trilogy was probably not enthused about it because at the time, the prequel trilogy was still kind of sour, and then there were the giant group of people that were like, "The mouse is going to ruin it. The mouse is going to ruin it. Disney should not own Star Wars."
Blah, blah, blah. Ruin it.
Well, there's that, and I think that's why they kind of had to put that in there. But we can actually talk about, since we're on the same trilogy, a trailer that did that for the same reasons that you were worried about.
Turns out Kathleen Kennedy's the one just ruining it.
The trailer for the Rise of Skywalker, where at the very end you hear Palpatine's laughter.
Ruined it.
Exactly.
Also, why is he there? Somehow Palpatine survived. What kind of excuse is that?
Makes no sense. There's theories out there that he's a clone. There's theories that it's actually him and he's just like...
Yeah, but their literal explanation in the movie was somehow Palpatine survived.
Yes.
And why did they have to make Rey his granddaughter? Why couldn't Rey stay a nobody?
Or better yet, why couldn't she be
not better yet.
She could have been a Kenobi,
nobody.
dude.
No. Stay a nobody. Because that makes her so much more interesting. I thought Rey was interesting until they said, you're Palpatine's granddaughter.
Well, and here we finally arrived at a true debate, because I actually feel pretty strong on the fact that I don't disagree with being a nobody because it doesn't take anything away, obviously. But I think, hear me out here, the whole thing with Satine kind of fell flat because...
She died.
Well, yeah, but I mean...
She got schwacked.
Every single person watching that episode of Clone Wars felt that Obi-Wan should have had something to show for the fact that you can have both sometimes. You can have a child, and that child can be super powerful. And the good guys never have that. And if they do, it gets taken away from them because they get turned into a bad person. Because like Harvey Dent said, you either live long enough or die the hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. So I could see that. But like I said, I agree with the fact that she should not have been a Palpatine. I hated that because first of all, it didn't give them enough time to showcase that struggle of, holy crap, like Luke had almost half a movie to process the fact that Vader was his father. Oh no, he had an entire movie to process the fact that Vader was his father. And you saw that struggle. You saw the struggle where he was taken prisoner and he was being brought up to the Emperor. And, he's like, there's still good in you, father. I feel that. Rey had no time to process anything about Palpatine. She didn't even know what he looked like. And all of a sudden she's like, oh, so my grandpa's bad? Okay, cool. And they're like, no, dude, your grandpa's like Hitler bad. And we're like, oh, okay. And she's nothing, like no form of reference, no nothing, So that hatred, that, Harry Potter Voldemort moment just fell flat because they each, like, she didn't know. Even Palpatine had no idea, So yeah, I agree with you 100%. She should not have been a Palpatine, but I could also see that it could have been better, way better, if she was. a Kenobi. But
It
at the
was
same
just,
time,
at that point, the generational thing was kind of just overdone. Like, you already had, obviously Anakin into Luke. You had Palpatine around for 3 movie trilogies. And if he's so good, how does he literally electrocute himself at the end of every trilogy? I don't know.
it's true.
And then you had the Fetts. Boba Fett is the son of Jango Fett, son, clone. You guys get it. And then who else do we have? Kylo Ren is the son of Leia and Han, which I thought that was super interesting. I was like, oh, that's how they're going to do the generational thing. Let's stick with that. The villain is now the son of not even the direct hero. I think it was great that they didn't make it Luke's daughter. That would have been probably the worst thing they could have done.
Agree, yeah.
No.
Right. But it still kept it as a Skywalker story by having that, which made it to where at the very end, which is
the worst line of all the movies was uttered, Rey Skywalker.
Oh, we're using our made-up names. I'm Spider-Man.
Yeah, exactly. The literal worst line of the movies was uttered, and that was, I'm Rey. Rey who? Rey Skywalker.
Yeah.
No, it's Rey Palpatine.
That and the fact that the Disney Legacy Saber is not true to her. It doesn't have that clicky thing, which I was super excited about.
Oh, the top thing? That's another thing, is her lightsaber was awesome at the end.
Yeah.
Why can't we have... I would have rather them copied Return of the Jedi, and at the beginning of the movie, she shows up with this brand new lightsaber than what they did with it.
Yes, and I don't know if you've seen... There's actually a deleted scene of Luke creating his lightsaber. It was just cut from
the original trilogy?
Yeah, it was just cut from the movie. You actually see him. He's in a cave, and you can see, like, I believe R2 is, like, shining a light so he can see what he's doing, and he's adding final adjustments to it. And then, like, you see his robotic hand grab a hold of it and turn it on for the first time.
Well, it's probably better that they didn't do that, because now we see how they do the whole Force to build it. Use the Force to build it, so it would have kept it, consistent, like where he didn't, use his hands physically and screw everything in. That I think it's probably better that it wasn't included. However, I would have loved to see that.
Yeah, another soft retcon.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it would have been way more interesting if instead of, they literally already destroyed the saber at the end of The Last Jedi. Leave it destroyed. Don't put a leather strap around it. How does a leather strap hold in a kyber crystal exploding to make a beam of light to fight people with?
I think, is this another Kathleen Kennedy?
Kathleen Kennedy is the devil.
Okay, we heard it here. So, I think we pretty much covered everything except for this very last one.
I never even said which one was my favorite.
Of the
sequel.
The sequels.
You said you liked The Force Awakens the best?
Yes.
Man, I know I like The Force Awakens a lot, but I definitely have a few problems with it. I felt like it didn't really tell enough of a story. Rey was just kind of whiny. She was actually, in my opinion, more interesting a character between that one and the second one than she was in the third one, because they said, okay, you're just a Palpatine. All right, cool. And then, oh, I'm Rey Skywalker. Shut up. And then Finn was super interesting in the first one, and they threw him away for the next two, so that, puts negative points on them. Kylo Ren had, in my opinion, the best character development between the 3 movies. Oh, and by the way, Poe Dameron literally doesn't even meet Rey until the second movie.
True.
Did you realize that? He just doesn't meet her.
Yep.
He's not a part of the group. And then he's not interesting after the first movie. He's like, it's like the Han Solo effect. Like, he does his thing in the first movie and then just isn't important for the rest of them. He might as well have actually died in the X-Wing or the TIE fighter crash.
Well, I will say he as much as, the movie itself might not be held with high regard with the most, with the populace or whatever, but I think he does. You get to see a lot more of him in The Rise of Skywalker than I thought you would.
Well, actually, let me renege back on that one a little bit. In the second one, I think he was actually kind of interesting in The Last Jedi, where he does this whole, like, arguing with Leia and arguing with Holdo, trying to say, hey, this isn't right. And it just shows. But also, on the other side of that is it doesn't make sense why she's just not saying, hey, this is the strategy.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of holes with it. I think, whenever you have a trilogy with any kind of story where you're going to have, the same story carrying on from movie to movie, once you change directors, sometimes that is a recipe for disaster, and other times it's seamless, and sometimes it just gets better. I mean, I talk about this all the time with the classic cases of Terminator 2, Aliens, Empire Strikes Back. 2 of those happen to have James Cameron, the other one Irvin Kershner, but I mean, they're both really good at what they did. you know, and for me, it's like you can tell whenever you see so much passion or safety, however you want to look at it. You know, if episode 7 was just a giant safety blanket on J.J. Abrams' part, I totally get that, which is probably why you felt that it didn't have that good of a storytelling or that good of a story, because episode 4 didn't either. And he pretty much copied it, because how do you
copying it? There is definitely way more to it.
I mean that, yeah, but to me, it's just it was a smart move, because again, you were reintroducing Star Wars after whatever the gap was, and you were trying to do the same thing, which was keep the original fandom and get new fans without changing too much on either direction, and keep that perfect balance, which is really hard to do without copying.
I'd probably say my favorite's The Rise of Skywalker.
That's fair. I mean, The Rise of Skywalker does have a lot of memorable scenes that I think carried the trilogy. For me, anyway, that fight with Kylo on top of, I forget what they were on top of, but it was when all the water was crashing and they
Death
were.
Star.
Was it the Death Star? I thought they were on a ship or something.
I know it was right next to
the entrance of the Death Star. Yeah.
I don't remember. It's debris.
Yeah,
some Imperial debris.
Then like flying or whatever.
Star Destroyer.
Yeah, it was great. And then of course the part that you know, you were talking about, where they actually finally show Palpatine, and you know, oh, he's alive and stuff, and you actually got to see.
Awesome,
yeah, you got to see. I think I don't think it's Korriban anymore. It's something else now.
Moraband.
Yeah. And you know, you got to see all the acolytes and all that stuff, and I thought that was really cool, because that's the first time in live action that we saw more than one Sith or more than two Sith at any given time.
Yeah.
So that was amazing, and you know, I was hoping that they did. You know, that one video that we watched, that I forget who it was. I'll try and find it if I can. I'm sorry, but I'll try and find it and link it in the description so you guys can check it out. There was a YouTuber who made a fan ending of episode 9 where he actually superimposed when yeah,
it was just kind of so first it showed Rey, and then when everybody spoke to her, it showed the face, kind of like a spirit over them speaking, and then when she, you know, readied up, it showed like this kind of like the spirits behind her, and then it did the same for Palpatine.
And we got to see like Nihilus and Malik and all the characters that we never saw in live action yet.
Which that was okay. It actually looked decent for a fan-made thing. I loved the fight with Kylo Ren and the Knights of Ren.
Oh, yeah.
Or I should say Ben Solo, because at that point he is Ben Solo again, you know, whatever. But I loved how they have finally learned to master this kind of connection they have, kind of like how Bastila and Revan do in the Old Republic, which I know you're not terribly familiar with.
Not yet.
But they bring it to a whole other level, and they're able to intentionally pass objects through that connection. People hate it. I loved it.
Now, they did it right.
He just does it.
I think, you know,
the saber.
Yeah. Objectively, they did it right, though, because it wasn't something they just sprung on us.
Yeah.
You saw it.
You saw the development of the skill. First, they could just see each other, and then they could, I think, see surroundings.
Yep.
And then, or no, first it was objects couldn't pass through. So he like snatched the necklace from her, and then you could see surroundings. And then finally, they could intentionally say, here's this, you know. Now, that was awesome.
Getting a little bit off topic, but not really, because we're still talking about the same trilogy. What were your thoughts on the romance that we got 5 seconds before he transformed into the Force?
It was actually very reminiscent of the Old Republic. That was copying definitely the Old Republic, if anything. It was the Bastila Revan one. And even playing that game, I thought it was kind of a dumb, you know, romance. It didn't really make much sense. And I guess you have options. You don't have to do it, or I don't remember, whatever the case may be. It was just kind of forced. It wasn't necessary.
Forced the hat.
But I don't really have a problem with it, you know.
I'm
cool with it being there.
For me, things like in this example specifically, not in general, to make that clear. I like it because how do I word this? In real life, when you work with someone, or when you're with someone for a long period of time, for whatever reason, you grow attached to that person. You learn what they like, what they dislike, that kind of thing. Normally, that is just biology. You get attracted to that person to some degree. You know, obviously in this case, these are two movie stars that are both incredibly attractive, so that helps too. But you know, they basically were each other's priority for so long. Kylo's like actively, Rey's like inactively to some degree, or you know, cause and effect kind of deal. But I liked it because it's unconventional. Going back to the whole Obi-Wan Satine thing, you know, to show that the Jedi Order is was all about this like strict code of how to live. If those of you, which, you know, I'm not trying to single you out here, but those of you who are like familiar with like the Christian faith, for example, you know, the original Old Testament was such a strict guideline. And then like the New Testament is like, okay, you know, Jesus was like, God was a little too crazy. Let's kind of like dial it back a little bit, and you don't have to, you know, kill your, you know, your lamb and your kid and, you know, all that kind of thing. So, I like to see them break the rule a little bit, even if it was unintentional, behind the scenes or not, of them saying, well, you know, there can be love with Jedi, because then they're more relatable that way. You know, we've all been in situations where we know we have to do the right thing or whatever is the rules, and then life kind of just happens and attractions happen and all that kind of stuff. And it was just nice to see that. It sucked that that was the very last thing that they did, but at the same time, it was kind of bittersweet. I was shocked that he transformed into the Force, because that, to me, that was just like, I didn't think that would happen.
Luke?
No, I'm talking about Kylo, because like, yeah, because then like, what was the purpose of healing him to some degree? He could have just like, they could have made the wound a little bit more superficial and have him just get there, because he didn't do any fighting anyway. So the fact that she healed him only to kiss him and him transform into the Force, it just seemed like, why heal him all the way if he was destined to transform into the Force anyway?
She didn't know. She tried to save him first, and then he did the opposite. He saved her back.
Yeah, and I guess that makes for the Shakespearean element that we were talking about in the beginning. But I think we've covered the last two kind of out of order. But if not, let's just sum up.
I was gonna say this is a little fan thing I saw that kind of touched on a little bit what you were talking about, how Jedi can still have love, or, you know, have a connection, whether it be traditional or non-traditional. And I think literally I have this thing on my phone, and it is the smallest thing. It is a picture with a small text excerpt, and it was Grogu.
Oh,
grown. And, you know, he speaks full, you know, basic English, you know.
Basic, common.
And he's wearing, you know, his general robes. And the one other thing he's wearing is a pauldron with the mud horn on it. And he's holding the ball. You know, he's like...
Yeah, the spaceship.
Yeah. And it's him talking to, like, a Padawan or whatever. And the whole thing was going back and forth. And it was saying, oh, I thought you couldn't have connections or whatever. And then he's like, he's sharing the wisdom. And this is all fan made. It's literally just somebody else pointed out. And I thought it was a perfect, you know, example of kind of what you're getting at. And the other person, but the Padawan basically says, I thought you couldn't have connection. He says, no, you can have connections. You just, it's not connections that lead to the dark side. It's the fear of losing them. So you need to accept them. And they say something along the lines of like, oh, that's, you know, that's complicated or something like that. They say something, and then he goes, no, that is the way.
Yeah.
And I like look at that. I literally read that little thing, and I should like see if I can put it in the comments or whatever, put up on the screen. And it literally gives me chills just reading that little bit there. And the imagery, I couldn't say who the artist was. I don't know. Looks amazing. And it was just like, oh, it shows that story. Like, hey, you can have that connection. You just have to know to accept it. That was some super like Yoda wisdom there, that how does Yoda not have that in the original trilogy or the prequel trilogy, right? And then it just talked about the connection between you know, Din Djarin and Grogu, even though he wasn't fully trained yet, you know.
Right.
So I really hope that in the future something like that happens in the Star Wars universe. I want them to explore more of Grogu. I want him to grow up. I want to see who he is. And I don't want Ben Solo to kill him along with all the other Padawans that he killed of Luke's, because that's basically what happens, right?
Yeah, I hope that they find a way to make him slip through the cracks.
Exactly.
Because they kind of did write themselves into that. And I know that that was basically Rogue One, but we talked about how something that's predetermined and you know how it's going to end doesn't really matter. It kind of matters the journey kind of deal. And that could be something that could share that same you know, mentality or whatever. I do appreciate the fact that the new "May the Force be with you" is now "This is the way." That's what you hear everywhere you go. If you see a group of kids talking about the Mandalorian in school or something, you know, you hear them. At least one of them says "This is the way," and they may or may not say "May the Force be with you." But
I have spoken.
Yeah, it's definitely the new catchphrase for Star Wars, and I like it because it's its own thing. You know, I've said it so many times. Jon Favreau is literally saving Star Wars for so many people that I know.
Jon Favreau is our Lord and Savior. Dave Filoni too.
Yeah, Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau are like the holy duo, you know, of Star Wars. And
Kathleen Kennedy is the devil.
Yeah. Okay. Well, again, you've heard it twice now, so it must be true. But yeah, so I think that pretty much covers it. I know my kids are screaming in the background. But yeah, I think that covers it, unless you have any other...
I do want to touch on a little bit more. So we kind of touched on those two. the most underused character from each trilogy. I've talked about 2 of them already. For the first one, I would definitely say Darth Maul.
Okay.
He could have been a way more fleshed out villain. Obviously, we saw it in Clone Wars, but I think that it should have been seen on the big screen. The sequels, Boba Fett.
Well, before we go into the sequels, I think Darth Maul and the other side of the coin is Qui-Gon Jinn.
Yes, but we got a lot more of Qui-Gon Jinn than we did of Darth Maul.
True.
And you kind of got explained who he was as a character, how he went against the council, and kind of where that rebellion comes from later on. So while I agree that he was underused, I think that Darth Maul was more so underused. And then, yeah, sequels. Boba Fett.
100%.
Badass character.
This is literally the only character in all of Star Wars that didn't even have to have a script mailed to his house to know what he had to do.
Peter Mayhew even had a script.
Yeah. I mean, I would imagine Vin Diesel got a script of when to say I am Groot and how to say I am Groot, but I forget his name for the longest time.
Nothing Stronger Than Family.
Yeah, right.
I love those memes. I don't care what anybody says.
Dude, for real. But yeah, it's weird.
Movies, though.
You do?
Fast and Furious?
Yeah.
They're not that good.
They're not good, but I like them
best
because
one?
they're just nostalgic.
The best one, Tokyo Drift.
My favorite one's 5, but that's for another video. Anyway, but yeah, so I feel like they could have done so much more with Boba Fett. Of course, that gave the allure. Now you have like OG fans saying, "Oh, you were a Mandalorian fan because of Din Djarin, and I was a Mandalorian fan because of Boba Fett," you know, and a lot of people are like, "Oh, that shows how old you are," and that shows, you know, whatever. But be that as it may, the character was underutilized like crazy. All we got, other than his few lines and few scenes in episode 5 and episode 6, was this terrible clip, which I'm just gonna insert it here. And I don't know why they chose to do that, but I'm glad that he is back in the story and back in like the mythology of all of Star Wars and everything. We get to see, you know, especially Tamara Morrison come back and play the closest thing to, you know, the Boba Fett face that we got to see, because obviously we didn't know who was under that helmet in the beginning. I actually ran out of room on this table to display. I actually have a Boba Fett helmet as well, that we were going to have in like the front drop or whatever of the podcast studio today, but I ran out of room. So unfortunately we're talking about you now, Boba. You're over there hanging out by yourself in the corner, but too many helmets. Yeah. But yeah, so for me, I feel like the most underutilized character, we agree on episode 1, I think for the most part. Episode 2, or the
first trilogy,
and the second trilogy. For the third trilogy,
if you say anybody other than Finn, you're wrong.
Well, that I was gonna say other than Finn, because Finn was definitely, like we said, thrown in the trash compactor. But I just felt like he was underutilized, yes, because he had so much potential. But then
poorly utilized.
Yes, he was poorly utilized. But for me, I was so much more interested in Poe Dameron. Because for me, it was like he started right off the bat. He was not confused. He had an agenda. He was like, I hate the Emperor, the First Order or whatever. And then it gave him and Finn that Luke Han relationship immediately. And I loved it, because to me, it was like, oh, hey, we don't have time to think. Get in this. And plus, we got to see how a TIE fighter works, where, it, you know, when it has... or not a TIE fighter, but was it a TIE fighter? I can't remember. Yeah, it was a TIE fighter. Yeah. The First Order TIE. Yeah. We got to see one that holds 2 pilots, because the original ones only held 1 pilot. So we got to see a gunner and in a TIE. And I mean, come on, I'm a TIE pilot. That's crazy. That was great for me to see that on the big screen. But I don't disagree. Finn probably is a little higher on the list of being underutilized or poorly utilized. But Poe Dameron, as you pointed out earlier, was just kind of like meh. And I think that if he was utilized more, that would have soaked up a little bit more of that meh, unfortunate, you know, event.
Finn.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair. This man's, and I agree with you.
Finn should have been the main character of the trilogy.
Finn should have been the main character.
Oh yeah,
that'd be great for me. And this sucks, because this might just exemplify or amplify your point even further. My clearest Finn memory is the fact that when that trailer started, he scared the ever living out of me, dude, because he
was like heavy breathing.
Yeah.
Just pulls off the helmet.
Yes. Because
that
like the trailer starts
awesome.
super quiet, and then just like, I'm not even going to do it on the mic just to blow your ears out, but it is horrifying. Try watching episode 7 trailer, turn the volume even halfway on any device you're watching, and tell me it doesn't just startle the crap out of you when he pops up and just starts breathing like he just ran a marathon. And it's crazy because I think every time you see Finn, with the exception of when he's unconscious, he is always out of breath.
I don't know about all that, but yeah, it was fantastic.
But yeah, I think that's going to cover this segment, I should say, of Star Wars. We're probably going to have many, many episodes. The more we think about and the more, just conflicts and just observations and just little epiphanies that we have as Star Wars fans. And as the Star Wars fandom grows and as the franchise grows, we're probably going to have more and more topics to cover here on the podcast. But this one, we just had to do a Star Wars episode sooner rather than later. And these first few episodes are definitely getting us off the ground. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you enjoyed all the camera going crazy over all the heads that it had to focus on.
It's still going all over the place.
Definitely. But yeah, we had a great time, mocking this up and writing this script up and stuff. And hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and hopefully you learned something. I know we learned something. We each, I think, taught the other something. And if you made it to the ending of the video, this is where I'm going to put all these wonderful plugs somewhere in front of us. There's too many things that are blocking, so we're just going to probably roll them in front. These are the names of the wonderful, wonderful patrons of the channel. They are directly responsible for the channel's growth by contributing their hard-earned money every month. And if you would like to be a member of that, yeah, contributing. Thank you. Yes. Their hard-earned money at the end of every month, they get to have benefits such as watching videos and listening to videos like this early. And they get their name at the end of every video, just like this. They get added to a raffle at the end of every month where I send something that I either make or 3D print or a collectible of some sort sent to their house as, thank you, a special thank you for being a patron. There's also a Discord for certain levels, certain tiers. I'm actually working with a couple friends trying to reevaluate the benefits at this point in time, trying to give more benefits and allow you guys to get more bang for your buck so you feel more invested in the channel. But for those of you who have been patrons from the very beginning, thank you so much. It was your idea to help me make a Patreon. I didn't go into this thinking I was going to ever have a Patreon, but you guys asked for it, and I'm glad you have stuck with me. There are other ways to contribute to the channel, like a Teespring page. All the links will be in the description. I know I had a ton of fun, and we have one question.
We do have one question. I actually have it pulled up for you. So Matthew D asks, I have a question for you guys stemming from the short talk about Quicksilver and Ralph Boner. The whole dick joke that they decided to make out of the Quicksilver. How would you like to see the X-Men and the mutants brought into the MCU? And he also said, great video. We appreciate that, man.
So as far as the X-Men and the MCU and the New Mutants, I assume is what you were getting at. I loved the New Mutants. If that's who you're referring to.
He said, how would you like to see the X-Men and mutants brought into the MCU?
Oh, okay.
He didn't talk about the New Mutants.
Okay,
where'd you get that?
Okay, so the X-Men and just the regular mutants, I guess, from the Fox universe, I think that would be great to some degree. I think the longer they wait, the worse it's going to be received unless they do it really, really, really tastefully. I know you in the last episode said that you weren't a big fan. You thought Hugh Jackman was overrated. I'm obviously a huge Wolverine fan, so any kind of cameo would be appreciated. We've already got some of those already, so we know how good they go over with the fans.
Overrated also doesn't mean bad, by the way.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair.
He's great. I just don't think he's as good as people gave him credit for.
I think, honestly, this point of the game, the character that would be most, receptive or whatever, the best with the fans would probably be Deadpool because of the comedy and the fact that the MCU is still a little rigid when it comes to comedy. It has a lot of dark comedy, a lot of sarcasm, but it doesn't really have like black comedy, I guess you would say, like really dark, like obscure, like crude comedy that's still tasteful, maybe without all the cursing. Because Deadpool is just all about all that.
The cursing.
And I think that if Disney does it right, I think they can still salvage that. Like maybe even do what they did with Once Upon a Deadpool, and then they have like the actual Deadpool, and maybe just, I think we talked about it in the past, using like Buena Vista or one of their other companies that they own to push out the Deadpool, movies and stuff, and make it to where you know what you're getting yourself into when you go see Deadpool. Don't take the little ones, kind of thing, and that way fans like us who are growing up with these characters don't have to, lose out on who their characters are, coming from the comic books and stuff like that. I think it's a good idea. I think they're headed in that direction. I appreciate the fact that you mentioned the dick joke, because it obviously is very, very frustrating for us super fans like us. And that's all I really have to say on that question. What about you, CJ?
Well, he kind of asked how you want to see them brought into the MCU.
Oh, specifically how?
You didn't answer his question at
Oh,
all.
sorry. So specifically, how I would like for them to be entered would be using the Wakanda scene from Endgame, where I can't remember. Is it Okoye who says it?
What is the line?
Is she the one that shows up in the hologram? She's the Wakandan that shows up in the hologram, right? When Black Widow was talking. Yeah, and she says, "Oh, there was a disturbance in Wakanda, but we handled it."
It's Namor.
Yeah. I think that's what they should do, because Namor in the comics ties into the X-Men and the Fantastic Four at the exact same time.
I didn't know he tied into the X-Men.
Yeah, so with Namor, like, if memory serves, something happens, and then the professor gets notified in Westchester, and then he is secretly, I don't want to say a society, but he has like communications with T'Challa and Doctor Strange and Iron Man, and they all get together in the road to Civil War and all that stuff. So his connections are there, and then they can seamlessly bring in the Fantastic Four, because Reed Richards and the professor end up getting this really big connection and stuff. His memory serves, like I said, I don't remember how many comics this whole thing happens from, but it would be great, because you would knock out two birds with one stone in showing the Fantastic Four and the X-Men, two Fox properties that will just seamlessly join the MCU. And I think if they do, like, for me, I would love to see Daniel Radcliffe play a young Wolverine.
That's what a lot of people have said.
Yeah.
I could see that.
He definitely has like the look, and I think he has the acting chops to pull it off. And it's just my opinion. Actors that are not American playing American accents, I think we get it a little bit, like, the chances of it delivering are a little harder, because the actors have to literally work to embody a character. And I think it's just perfect. Like, it worked with Heath Ledger as the Joker. It worked with Tom Holland as Spider-Man. I think it's perfect. And it just seems a little bit more like a character and not just like an acting role. So
let's get Vin Diesel as Professor X.
Yeah, because he's bald.
Yeah. Adamantium is strong.
The only thing that's strong.
But not as strong as family.
But yeah, hopefully that answered your question. Thank you so much for leaving it. And that also can round us off by saying leave a question as another plug, and we'll read it in the next episode, just like we did this question. And thank you so much for leaving it. And just let us know that you want it to be read out in the podcast, and we'll definitely read out your question and show it on screen like we did. So.
And I'll go to hell with my answer.
I'm sorry. What's your answer?
I'm sorry. So I think it would be super interesting. The way to bring it in is similar, I guess. I didn't realize that Namor was associated, but I think it would be cool if it was more of a, hey, these guys have, instead of just saying, hey, all of a sudden these guys exist, saying, well, they've always existed, and they kind of come out of hiding a little bit, you know?
Yeah.
I think that would be the best way to do it.
Kind of like showing scenes of like other movies where, kind of like the Ahsoka thing, where like, she was
Mysterio thing where he does flashbacks and says, hey, this guy was hiding in this thing or whatever. But you don't necessarily have to do that. Like what they did with the ancient one in Endgame,
right,
where she was helping fight the battle in New York.
And you just never saw it because the cameras were never rolling.
Exactly. Gotcha.
That would be probably a more Disney way of doing it, and not make it such a big deal, because sometimes when you overhype something, you set yourself up for expectation problems and all that good stuff. But that's probably going to be covered in another episode of the podcast, because we've run out of time. So thank you so much for watching. Unless you have anything else to say, CJ, I think that's going to cut it for this episode.
Yeah, I'm good. You guys take care.
Yeah, I'm good. But yeah,
cut me off 3 times.
Sorry. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and hopefully you enjoyed it enough to leave it a thumbs up and to subscribe if you're new here. And yeah, this has been Pastor and
CJ.
Didn't cut you off that time, did I?
No. Justice for Finn.
Justice for Finn. And apparently Kathleen Kennedy is what? The devil?
The devil. Okay. Satan herself.
Gotcha. All right. Well, you heard it here. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next episode. Thank you so much.